Park Yuna stood in the docking bay of the Volari command ship and wondered what she had done wrong in her life to deserve this assignment. The ship was called Fang of Dawn. It was massive. Dark metal walls stretched in every direction, covered with claw marks and old battle damage that the crew had never bothered to fix. The air smelled like blood and something sharp that made her eyes water. Everything was built for creatures much larger than her. The ceiling was so high she could barely see it. The doorways were wide enough for 3 humans to walk through side by side. And everywhere she looked, there were Volari. They were 7 feet tall. Some were even taller. Their bodies were covered in short fur that ranged from deep black to silver gray. Their faces looked like big cats from Earth, but their eyes were wrong. Too intelligent. Too cold. When they looked at her, she could see them calculating how long it would take to kill her. Their claws were the worst part. Black as night and sharp enough to cut through metal. She had read the reports. During the first contact, a Volari warrior had torn through the hull of a human scout ship with nothing but her bare hands. The Galactic Council had predicted that humanity would be extinct within 10 years of meeting the Volari. They were the greatest predators the galaxy had ever seen. Their empire covered 40 star systems. They had never lost a war in 3,000 years of recorded history. But somehow, against all logic, the Volari had offered humanity an alliance instead of destruction. No one understood why. The Volari refused to explain. They simply demanded that one human be stationed on their command vessel as a cultural observer. The human government had agreed immediately. They had no choice. Yuna was the one they chose. She was a former combat medic with training in xenobiology. She spoke 3 human languages and had spent 2 years learning the basics of Volari speech. She was calm under pressure. She followed orders. She did not ask questions. In other words, she was expendable. A Volari officer approached her. He was enormous, even by their standards. His fur was pure black, and a long scar ran across his face from his left ear to his jaw. His eyes were the color of molten gold. "You are the human," he said. It was not a question. "Lieutenant Park Yuna," she replied. She kept her voice steady. "Reporting for duty." The officer made a sound deep in his throat. It might have been a laugh. It might have been a growl. She could not tell. "I am Commander Tall," he said. "This is my ship. You will stay out of the way. You will not touch anything. You will not speak unless spoken to. If you cause any problems, I will throw you out of an airlock myself." Yuna nodded. "Understood, Commander." Tall stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned and walked away without another word. Welcome to the Fang of Dawn, Yuna thought. The first few weeks were lonely and difficult. The Volari crew ignored her completely. They walked past her in the corridors as if she did not exist. When she entered a room, conversation stopped. When she tried to eat in the common area, everyone left. She understood. To them, she was prey. A small, soft creature with no claws and no fangs and no natural weapons of any kind. Her presence on their ship was an insult. The only reason they did not kill her was because their commanders had ordered them not to. But Yuna was patient. She had not survived this long by giving up easily. She learned the ship. She memorized every corridor, every door, every emergency exit. She studied the crew's routines and schedules. She figured out which Volari were more tolerant of her presence and which ones would attack if given the chance. And she watched. The Volari were fascinating creatures. Brutal and violent, yes, but also deeply loyal to their families and their pack. They fought constantly among themselves, but when an outside threat appeared, they united instantly. Their social structure was complex. Rank was determined by combat ability, but also by age, experience, and something they called honor debt that Yuna did not fully understand yet. Commander Tal was clearly the most powerful. Everyone deferred to him. When he spoke, the entire ship listened. His mate was named Vesa. She was the chief medical officer, nearly as tall as Tal, with silver-gray fur and eyes like winter ice. She was brilliant and cold, and she hated Yuna more than anyone else on the ship. Humans are a mistake of evolution, Vesa said one day when Yuna was observing in the medical bay. You're young or helpless for years. Years. A Valari cub can hunt within 6 months of birth. Your species should have gone extinct long ago. Yuna said nothing. There was nothing to say. Then, on the 47th day of her assignment, everything changed. The news spread through the ship like fire. Commander Tal and his mate, Vesa, were expecting cubs. Twins. The first cubs to be born on a military vessel in 3 generations. The crew celebrated for 7 days straight. There was feasting and fighting and singing in the ancient Valari town. Even Yuna was given extra rations, though no one spoke to her directly. When the cubs were born, the entire ship gathered outside the medical bay. They waited in silence as Vesa gave birth. And when the thin, high cry of newborns echoed through the corridor, every Valari on the ship raised their heads and howled in welcome. The cubs were named Ran and Kira. Ran was the larger one, with his father's black fur. Kira was smaller, silver-gray, like her mother. They were beautiful and perfect, and everyone agreed they would grow up to be great warriors. But on the 8th day after their birth, something went wrong. The cubs refused to stay in their mother's den. They screamed. They clawed at the walls. They would not nurse. They would not sleep. They bit anyone who tried to touch them, including Vesa herself. The medical team tried everything. They adjusted the temperature. They changed the lighting. They pumped synthetic hormones into the air. They sedated the cubs with drugs that should have knocked them unconscious for hours. Nothing worked. On the 12th night, Yuna woke from a restless sleep to find something warm and soft pressed against her pillow. She opened her eyes. 2 tiny Valari cubs were curled up beside her head. Their small bodies were trembling. Their eyes were closed. Their little claws kneaded the fabric of her blanket. And they were purring. Yuna lay completely still, afraid to breathe, afraid to move, afraid that any sound would wake them and they would start screaming again. But they did not wake. They slept peacefully against her, their small hearts beating in time with something they had been searching for since the moment they were born. A human heartbeat, slow, steady, calm, the sound of safety. What happened next had never been done before in all of Valari history. Yuna moved into the commander's family quarters. The room was massive. It was built for creatures 3 times her size. The bed was a wide platform covered with thick furs and cushions. The walls were decorated with weapons and trophies from Tal's many battles. Everything smelled like Predator Dot, but now, in the center of that great warrior's den, there was a small human woman with 2 cubs curled up against her chest. The arrangement was strange and uncomfortable at first. Vesa did not know how to act around Yuna. She was used to giving orders, not sharing space with the prey species. Tal avoided the quarters entirely, sleeping in his command chair on the bridge instead. But the cubs did not care about politics or pride or ancient traditions. They only knew that they were hungry and tired and scared, and that the human made them feel safe. So they slept between the 2 females. Yuna's slow heartbeat calmed them. Vesa's warmth and milk fed them. Together, the 2 mothers gave the cubs everything they needed to survive. It was not easy. Nothing about it was easy. Vesa had to learn patience. Valari mothers were fierce and protective, but they also pushed their young heart from the very beginning. Cubs were expected to be strong. Weakness was not tolerated. But Ran and Kira needed gentleness. They needed softness. They needed things that Vesa had never been taught to give. Yuna showed her. She showed Vesa how to hold the cubs without her claws extended. She showed her how to rock them gently when they cried. She showed her how to speak in soft, quiet tones instead of the sharp commands that came naturally to Valari. At first, Vesa resisted. It felt wrong. It felt like weakness. But when Kira fell asleep in her arms for the first time, purring softly against her fur, something changed in the silver-furred mother's face. She never did this before, Vesa whispered. She only slept for you. She trusts you now, Yuna said. You just had to learn how to show her it was safe. The crew did not know what to make of the situation. Lieutenant Sora was Tal's second in command. She was a fierce warrior with scars covering half her body. She had served under Tal for 15 years, and she had never questioned a single order he gave. Until now. This is an abomination, she said during a meeting of senior officers. The commander's cubs are being raised by a prey animal. It is shameful. It makes us all look weak. Other officers nodded in agreement. The whispers had been growing for weeks. Some said the cubs were defective. Some said they should have been killed at birth. Some said Tal had lost his edge, that he was letting his emotions control his decisions. Tal sat at the head of the table and said nothing. He knew what his officers were thinking. He had thought the same things himself. Every instinct in his body screamed that this was wrong. His children should be with their mother, not with some soft, weak human. But every time he thought about taking the cubs away from Yuna, he remembered the screaming. He remembered the blood on his arms. He remembered the look in his mate's eyes when she begged him to give the children back to the human Dot. His cubs were alive. They were healthy. They were growing stronger every day, Dot, and the human was the reason why, Dot. The weeks passed. The cubs grew. Ran was bold and adventurous. He was always escaping from the family quarters and exploring the ship's corridors. His favorite game was to hide in the shadows and jump out at passing crew members. Practicing his hunting skills. At first, the crew hated it. Being ambushed by a cub was embarrassing. But slowly, the attitude changed. Ran's attacks became a test. If a crew member could catch the cub before he escaped, they earned respect. If the cub caught them by surprise, they had to buy drinks for everyone in the common area. Yuna spent most of her time chasing after Ran, apologizing to startled crew members, and trying to catch the little troublemaker before he got into real danger. Kira was different. She was quiet and watchful. She preferred to stay close to Yuna, sitting in her lap during duty shifts, her tiny ears tracking every conversation in the room. She learned to speak faster than any cub in recorded history. Her first word was not the traditional Valari greeting or a call for her mother. It was a clumsy, broken attempt at a human name, Yuna. The ship's communication system recorded the moment. It was broadcast to every deck. For several seconds, no one spoke. No one moved. A Valari cub had spoken a human word. Navigator Han Jisoo was the first to break the silence. She was an older woman with gray hair and a dry sense of humor. She had served on alien vessels her entire career. "Wow," she said. "I guess that settles that." "Settles what?" another crew member asked. Jisoo looked at the cubs playing at Yuna's feet. Ram was chewing on a piece of leather. Kira was watching her with those two intelligent eyes. "They're not just Valari anymore," Jisoo said. "They're not human either. There's something new. Something that's never existed before." She smiled slightly. "They're bridge cubs, building a path between what we were and what we might become." The name spread through the ship like fire. Within days, everyone was using it. The bridge cubs. Ran and Kira, the children of two worlds. Not everyone was happy about it, but for now, the cubs were safe. They were loved. They had a den that included both a Valari mother and a human. Heart-giver. It was strange and unprecedented, and it broke 1,000. Ancient traditions, but it worked, and in the darkness of space. Far from home. That was all that mattered. Then the distress signal came, It was from a small colony on a planet called Vareth 4, a mining settlement. 300 Valari civilians. The message was broken and desperate, talking about raiders and attacks and children in danger. Commander Tal did not hesitate. He ordered the ship to maximum speed. They would reach the colony in 18 hours. No one suspected it was a trap. No. One knew that the raiders had been watching the Fang of Dawn for months, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. No. One realized that the bridge cubs had become the most valuable targets in the entire sector, and no one saw the boarding pods being launched toward the ship as it entered orbit around Vareth 4. The attack came at night, while the cubs were sleeping peacefully in Yuna's arms. Yuna did not move for 3 hours. She lay in her small bed with 2 predator cubs pressed against her neck, listening to them purr, watching the ceiling, and wondering how she was possibly going to explain this to anyone. The cubs had found their way into her quarters somehow. The door had been locked. The ventilation shafts were supposed to be too small for anything larger than a rat. But Valari cubs, she was learning, were very determined creatures when they wanted something. And apparently, what they wanted was her. When the ship's morning alarm sounded, Yuna finally moved. She sat up slowly, carefully, supporting the cubs with her hands so they would not fall. They stirred but did not wake. Their small faces looked peaceful for the first time since their birth. She looked at them for a long moment. Then she took a deep breath and walked out of her quarters. The corridor was empty at first. Then a young Valari crew member turned the corner and stopped dead. His golden eyes went wide. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Yuna walked past him without a word. She found her way to the medical bay. Every Valari she passed had the same reaction: shock, disbelief, horror. Some of them reached for their weapons before remembering that she was supposed to be protected by the alliance agreement. By the time she reached the medical bay, half the ship seemed to be following her. Vesa was inside, standing over an empty crib. Her silver fur was matted and dirty. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep. She had spent 12 days trying to save her children, and she had failed. When she saw Yuna walking carrying the cubs, something broke in her face. "What have you done?" she whispered. "Nothing," Yuna said. "They came to me. I woke up and they were there." Vesa's claws extended. Her lips pulled back from her teeth. A growl built in her throat, deep and dangerous. "You stole my children." "No." Yuna kept her voice calm. "I would never do that. They found their way into my quarters on their own. They were purring. They were sleeping. It's the first time they've slept since they were born." Commander Tal pushed through the crowd at the door. His face was twisted with rage. His claws were out and ready to kill. "Give me my cubs," he snarled. Yuna held them out immediately. She had no desire to die over a misunderstanding. Tal grabbed the cubs and pulled them to his chest. For a moment, everything was still. Then the cubs woke up. They started screaming. The sound was terrible, high and sharp and full of pain. The cubs twisted in their father's grip, clawing at his arms, trying desperately to get away. Their small mouths opened wide, and they howled like they were being tortured. Tal held on. He was a warrior. He had survived 100 battles. He could handle 2 newborn cubs. But the cubs would not stop. They screamed and clawed and bit. Blood ran down Tal's arms from a dozen small wounds. The watching crew began to back away, their faces troubled. After 5 minutes, Vesa stepped forward. "Give them to the human," she said quietly. Tal's head snapped toward her. "What?" "Give them to her. Now. before they hurt themselves. Tal looked at his mate for a long moment. Then, slowly, he held the cubs out toward Yuna. She took them gently. The moment they touched her skin, the screaming stopped. The cubs pressed their faces against her neck, their small bodies trembling, and began to purr again. The medical bay was completely silent. Kang Do-hyun was the ship's human-assigned xenobiologist. He was a quiet man with kind eyes and steady hands. He had been stationed on the Fang of Dawn for 2 years before Yuna arrived, studying Valari biology and trying to understand what made them so different from every other species in the galaxy. Now he stood in front of a holographic display, showing test results to a room full of angry Valari officers. "The cubs have imprinted," he explained, "but not on their parents. On Lieutenant Park." Tal's growl shook the walls. "That is impossible. The Lari cubs bond with their bloodline. It is biology. It cannot be changed." "Normally, yes," Do-hyun agreed. "But these cubs were born in an unusual environment. A military vessel, surrounded by constant stress and aggression. Adult Valari hearts beat very fast, about 140 beats per minute. Human hearts beat much slower, 60 to 80 beats per minute." He pulled up a new image. 2 heartbeat patterns, side by side. To these cubs, surrounded by rapid, aggressive rhythms their entire lives, Lieutenant Park's heartbeat sounds like something completely different. Something their instincts have been searching for but could not find. "What?" Vesa demanded. "Safety," Do-hyun said. "Calm, peace. The deep relaxation that allows a newborn to sleep and grow and develop properly. They found it in her, and they bonded to it." Tal slammed his fist against the wall. The metal dented under his claws. "My children will not be raised by prey. Then they will die," Do-hyun said simply. "They are not eating. They are not sleeping. Their bodies are shutting down. If they do not bond with someone soon, they will be dead within a week." The room fell silent again. For 3 days, Tal refused to accept it. He ordered the cubs returned to their parents' den, and again. Each time, they screamed until their small lungs gave out. Each time, they escaped and found their way back to Yuna. The crew watched with growing unease. Some agreed with their commander. The cubs were defective. They should be culled before they weakened the bloodline. Valari did not accept weakness. It was their way. Others were not so sure. The cubs were the commander's children, the firstborn on this ship in 3 generations. To kill them would be a tragedy beyond words. On the 4th night, Vesa came to Yuna's quarters alone. She stood in the doorway, her silver fur dull and lifeless, her eyes empty. She looked like a mother who had lost everything. "My children are dying," she said. "I am their mother. I should be able to save them. But I cannot." Yuna said nothing. She held the sleeping cubs against her chest and waited. "I am told you can save them," Vesa continued. "I am told that your weak, slow, prey heart is the only thing in this universe that can keep my children alive." Her claws extended. Then, slowly she pulled them back. "I do not understand it. I hate it. But I will not let my pride kill my cubs." She stepped into the room. Her movements were stiff and awkward, like she was fighting against every instinct in her body. "Teach me," she said. "Teach me how to be what they need." Yuna looked at the desperate mother standing before her. Then she looked down at the cubs in her arms. "They don't need you to change," she said quietly. "They don't need you to be something you're not. They need both of us." She held out her hand. "Let me show you." Vesa stared at the offered hand for a long, long moment. Then, slowly, she reached out and took it. It was the first time a Valari had ever touched a human with gentleness. It would not be the last. The ship shook so hard that Yuna was thrown out of bed. She hit the floor with a painful crash, her shoulder slamming against the metal. The cubs tumbled after her, suddenly awake and crying in fear. Alarms were screaming. Red lights flashed in every direction. The entire ship seemed to be falling apart around her. Yuna grabbed the cubs and held them close. Her heart was racing, but she forced herself to stay calm. The cubs could feel her emotions. If she panicked, they would panic too. "It's okay," she whispered. "I've got you. It's going to be okay." Another explosion rocked the ship. Then another. Through the walls, Yuna could hear the sound of weapons fire and screaming. They were under attack. She ran to the door and tried to open it. Nothing happened. The emergency lockdown had sealed every bulkhead on the ship. She was trapped. The communications panel on the wall crackled to life. "All hands, this is Commander Tal. We have been boarded by Korath raiders. Multiple breaches on decks 3 through 7. All crew to battle stations. Protect the civilians at all costs." Korath. Yuna had heard of them. They were a scavenger species that roamed the outer rim of the galaxy, attacking weak targets and selling whatever they captured. They were cowards who avoided fair fights. But they were also dangerous. They knew how to exploit weakness. And they were very, very good at taking prisoners. Especially children. Yuna looked down at the cubs in her arms. Ran was growling, his tiny claws extended, trying to be brave. Kira was silent, her eyes wide, watching everything. They were the children of Commander Tal, the famous bridge cubs. If the Korath captured them, they would be worth a fortune on the black market. Exotic predator cubs with a human bond. Fighting pits across the galaxy would pay millions for them. Yuna could not let that happen. She looked around the room for weapons. There was nothing. This was a family quarters, not an armory. The closest thing to a weapon was a small emergency blade attached to the wall near the door. She grabbed it. The blade was barely 6 inches long. It was designed for cutting rope and emergency situations. Against a Korath raider, it was almost useless. But it was all she had. Then she heard them. Cutting tools. Just outside the door. The high-pitched whine of metal being sliced through. They were coming for the cubs. Yuna's mind raced. She could not fight. She could not run. The only thing she could do was hide the cubs and pray that help would come in time. She found a ventilation shaft in the corner of the room. It was small, barely large enough for the cubs to fit through. She pulled the cover off and looked inside. A dark tunnel stretched away into the walls of the ship. "Ran, Kira, listen to me." The cubs looked up at her with their golden eyes. "You have to go in there and hide. You have to be very quiet. No matter what happens, no matter what you hear, do not come out until your father comes to get you. Do you understand?" Ran's lower lip trembled. "Yuna, I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But I need you to be brave for me. Can you do that?" The cubs looked at each other. Then Kira took her brother's paw and pulled him toward the shaft. "We will be brave," she said quietly. "For you." Yuna lifted them into the shaft one by one. She watched them crawl into the darkness, their small bodies disappearing around a corner. Then she put the cover back on. The cutting stopped. A moment later, the door exploded inward. 3 Korath raiders stepped through the smoke. They were ugly creatures, with gray skin and too many joints in their arms. Their eyes were black and empty. They wore armor covered with trophies from their victims. The leader saw Yuna standing alone in the middle of the room and laughed. "Just a human?" he said. "Where are the cubs?" Yuna said nothing. The leader stepped closer. He was twice her size and armed with weapons that could cut through steel. "I asked you a question, pray. Where are the commander's children?" "Gone," Yuna said. "You're too late. The Korath did not believe her. He gestured to his companions, and they began searching the room. They tore apart the bed. They smashed the furniture. They ripped open every container and compartment they could find. They did not find the cubs. The leader turned back to Yuna. His empty eyes were cold with anger. "You're lying. Tell me where they are." "No." He hit her across the face. The blow knocked her to the ground, and she tasted blood in her mouth. Pain exploded through her skull. "Tell me." "No." He grabbed her by the throat and lifted her off the floor. His claws dug into her skin. She could not breathe. "I will kill you slowly," he hissed. "I will make it last for hours. Tell me where the cubs are, and I will make it quick." Yuna looked into his black eyes. She thought about Rand's brave little growl. She thought about Kira's quiet voice saying, "We will be brave for you." She spat blood in his face. The Korath roared with rage. He threw her against the wall. Her shoulder hit first, and she felt something crack. Pain shot through her entire body. She tried to stand. Her legs would not work. The Korath was coming toward her, claws extended, ready to tear her apart. "This is it," she thought. "I'm going to die. But at least the cubs are safe." Then the wall exploded. Commander Tal came through it like a force of nature. His black fur was covered with blood, some of it his, most of it not. His golden eyes burned with a fury that made the Korath look like children playing at war. He had torn through 6 decks of the ship to reach his family. The first Korath died before he could even raise his weapon. Tal's claws went through his chest and out the other side. The second tried to run and got 3 steps before Tal caught him and broke his neck with a single twist. The leader backed away, suddenly terrified. He had thought he was hunting weak prey. He had not expected to face the legendary Commander Tal in full battle rage. "Please," he begged. "Mercy." Tal looked at Yuna, lying broken on the floor. He looked at the blood on the walls. He looked at the empty room where his children should have been. "Where are my cubs?" he asked. His voice was quiet. That was more terrifying than any roar. "I don't know," the Korath whimpered. "The human wouldn't tell me. I swear, she wouldn't say anything. I tried to make her talk, but she wouldn't." Tal killed him with a single blow. Then he turned to Yuna. She was barely conscious, her body broken, still trying to drag herself toward the ventilation shaft to protect the cubs. He knelt down beside her. "Where are they?" he asked gently. Yuna raised one shaking hand and pointed at the shaft. Tal walked over and pulled off the cover. 2 pairs of golden eyes stared back at him from the darkness. "Papa," Kira whispered. Tal pulled his children out of the shaft and held them close. They were safe. They were alive. The human had protected them. He looked back at Yuna. She had passed out from the pain. Her body crumpled on the floor. A small, weak, fragile human. She had stood between his children and death. She had refused to break. And in that moment, Commander Tal finally understood what his mate had known for weeks. What his crew had been too proud to see. This human was not prey. She was family. Yuna woke up 3 days later in a bed that was much too big for her dot at first. She did not know where she was. The ceiling was high and dark. The air smelled like medicine and something else. Something warm and familiar. Then she heard the purring. She turned her head slowly. It hurt to move. Everything hurt. But she had to see. Ran and Kira were curled up on either side of her. They were sleeping peacefully, their small bodies pressed against her arms, their faces relaxed and content. They had not left her side since she was brought to the medical bay. Vesa was there too. The silver-furred mother sat in a chair beside the bed, watching over all 3 of them. When she saw Yuna's eyes open, something changed in her face. Relief, gratitude, things that Valari were not supposed to show. You are awake, Vesa said quietly. The cubs, they are safe. Because of you. Yuna closed her eyes for a moment. The memories came back slowly. The attack. The Korth. The pain. She had been so sure she was going to die. How bad? She asked. 3 broken ribs. A fractured shoulder. Internal bleeding that required surgery. Damage to your throat that will take weeks to heal. Vesa paused. Our doctors say you should have died. Humans are fragile. The damage was too severe. But you kept fighting. You kept living. She leaned forward. Why? Why did you not tell them where the cubs were hidden? You could have ended your suffering. You could have saved yourself. Yuna looked at the sleeping cubs beside her. Their small faces. Their tiny claws. Their soft purring that made her feel like everything in the universe was exactly as it should be. Because they're mine, she said simply. Vesa stared at her for a long moment. Then she did something that Yuna had never seen a Valari do before. She bowed her head. You have our eternal gratitude, she said. And our eternal debt. You saved the children of House Tal. That cannot be repaid. Before Yuna could respond, the door opened and Commander Tal walked in. He looked different somehow. Tired. Old. The battle rage was gone from his eyes. Replaced by something softer and more complicated. He carried a chair with him, much too small for his massive frame. He set it down beside the bed and sat in it, his knees up near his chest, looking ridiculous and not caring at all. My doctors tell me you will recover fully, he said. It will take time, but you will heal. Thank you. Tal shook his head. Do not thank me. I am the one who should be thanking you. He reached out and very gently touched the sleeping cubs with one massive paw. My people have a word, he said. Kathrai. It is very old. Very sacred. It means the one who guards the heart. He looked at Yuna. It is the highest honor a warrior can receive. It has never been given to a non-Valari. It has never been given to a prey species. But my mate and I have spoken. My officers have spoken. Even Lieutenant Sora, who hated you from the beginning, has spoken. He straightened in his ridiculous small chair. We wish to name you Kethray of House Tal, guardian of hearts, den mother of our children, full member of our family. Yuna did not know what to say. She had come to this ship expecting to be ignored at best and killed at worst. She had never imagined anything like this. I don't know what to do, she admitted. Tal smiled. It was the first time she had ever seen him smile. You do what you have always done. You love our children. You protect them. You teach them the things we cannot teach. And you stay with us for as long as you wish. He paused. If you wish. Yuna looked at the cubs sleeping beside her. She looked at Vesa, waiting with hope in her icy eyes. She looked at Tal, the legendary commander who had torn through an entire ship to reach his family. Yes, she said. I wish. The ceremony was held 2 weeks later in the Great Hall of the Valari High Council. The Fang of Dawn had limped back to Valari Prime with a damaged hull and a crew of warriors who would not stop talking about the human who had stood against 3 raiders with nothing but a small knife and a refusal to surrender. The story had spread across the Empire. Every Valari knew about the Bridge Cubs. Every Valari knew about the human who had saved them. Now they gathered to watch history being made. Yuna stood in the center of the Great Hall, still healing, still weak, but standing on her own 2 feet. Tal and Vesa flanked her on either side. Ran and Kira clung to her legs with complete disregard for proper behavior, and no one dared to tell them to move. The High Elder was ancient. His fur was white with age, and his body was covered with scars from battles fought before Yuna's great-grandmother was born. He had watched civilizations rise and fall. He had seen things that no one else in the galaxy had seen. Now he looked at the small human standing before him with 2 predator cubs wrapped around her legs. "When humans first appeared in our territory," he said, "the Galactic Council predicted your extinction. They said you were soft, weak. They said you would break against the teeth of the galaxy." He paused. They did not understand. He stepped forward until he was standing directly in front of Yuna. She had to tilt her head back to look at his face. They did not understand. That softness can be strength. That weakness can be courage. That the smallest heart can hold the largest love. He raised his ancient paw and placed it on her shoulder. "Parg Yuna, in the name of the Valari Empire, in the presence of all who have gathered here, I name you Kethri of House Tall, Guardian of Hearts, then Mother of the Bridge Cubs, full citizen of our empire, with all rights and honors the title holds." The hall erupted in sound. Thousands of Valari voices raised in a howl of welcome that shook the walls and rattled the windows. It was the same sound they had made when the cubs were born. The same sound they made to greet new members of their family. Yuna stood in the center of that sound, tears running down her face, and felt something she had not felt since she left Earth. She felt like she belonged. 15 years later, Ambassador Yuna stood on the observation deck of her personal ship and watched her children receive their military commissions. Ran was tall and fierce, with his father's black fur and his mother's strategic mind. He commanded his own ship now, the first joint human-Valari vessel in history. Kira was quieter, more watchful, just as she had always been. She led the first combined medical corps, saving lives across the galaxy without caring what species those lives belonged to. Both of them wore small pendants around their necks. Inside each pendant was a tiny recording device. The recording was of a human heartbeat. 62 beats per minute. Slow, steady, calm, the sound of safety. "You made us bridges," Kira had told her once. "But you were the first one to cross." Across the galaxy, predator and prey species studied the Valari-human alliance with confusion and wonder. It should not have worked. Everything in evolution and history said it was impossible. But humanity had never cared much about impossible. They did not win through strength, or speed, or natural weapons. They did not conquer through fear or violence. They won by making the most terrifying predators in the galaxy want to purr beside their pillows. They won by being family. And that, in the end, was the most human thing of all.